When I was 19 years old, I was still working at a nearby pizza place to help pay for food and gas and stuff. The job was always pretty easy, just taking the order, boxing up the food when it's done, putting it in a bag and driving it to the given address. I'd done it a million times before, and nothing weird ever happened. It was very repetitive. Tips would usually be around $3 to $5, depending on the distance. Sometimes more generous people would give 10 or more. Though I remember, this order was just a chicken parm hero, and a regular slice. Smaller orders like this usually yielded lesser tips, but I didn't have a choice in which deliveries I did. I was on my way to the address, and of course the house was apparently on a dead-end block. This block had a more rural feel to it than the rest of the neighborhood. One of the houses had an RV sitting on the grass with a small patch of woods next to it. The other houses looked like little farmhouses. There was a lot more space on this particular street. And then I pulled up to the address. It was this small, weird-looking house with a huge property, though, sat next to what appeared to be an abandoned house with overgrown grass and shrubs. It was probably around 6 p.m. and it was getting pretty dark out. So it was around the time people would start putting on their lights inside their houses. But all the lights in the house were off, and I noticed the front door seems cracked open. I began to walk over to the front door, and I heard a piano being played. It sounded like it was a couple rooms away, at least muffled by some walls or a door. Something. I knocked on the door and then rang the bell after a few minutes. Only the doorbell didn't work. Piano was still playing. I felt weird just walking in, so I walked around the property towards the back. The backyard was a literal mess. Things scattered all over the grass. I even saw a broken, rusty chain link fence just sitting in the middle of there. I went to the back door and knocked. Really loud. I looked through the glass of the door and saw nothing, except for what looked like a really messy storm room. Clearly, these people were not neat freaks, to say the least, when nobody answered the back door. Either I went back around front and called one of the guys at the pizzeria to confirm the address with him. He took a second to check what he wrote down, and he confirmed that I was at the correct address. So I went back to the front door, pushed it open, and heard the creepy sounding piano music still playing. I yelled, "Pizza's here." The piano stopped. Someone yelled, "Over here." Then the piano resumed. They were playing this simple yet creepy repetitive song as if on loop. There were also no lights on in this house, so it was almost hard to see in there. I walked straight, getting closer to the sound of the music. The smell inside the house was very musty and off-putting, and I got halfway into, I guess what you'd call the foyer. I felt very uncomfortable. I wasn't going to go any further. I yelled them by the front door, "Sir?" The music stopped this time for good, and now there was just silence, and back towards the door again so that I would be closer to the outside. I was expecting to hear footsteps coming towards me, but no. It was just dead silent. I said, "Sir," and a voice from another room said, "Yes. Sorry, I have trouble walking. Could you just bring it in here, please?" I asked, "What room are you in?" "Sir," and he took a moment to answer back, "If you just walk through the living room in thatening room." There were no directions on the phone to do any of this. So this was very strange. I thought for a second about my next course of action. I felt bad leaving in the case that this was some old feebleman just living in a messy house. I started walking through the living room, and there was an opening that led to what I presumed to be the dining room. Being my overly cautious and paranoid self was still suspicious. Instead of walking straight into the dining room, I peeked around the wall, just enough for one eye to see into the room. I saw the piano, but there was Noon sitting at it. I also didn't see anyone in the entire room. With that, I quietly but quickly walked back towards the front door, shut the door behind me, and drove back to the pizzeria. I explained that I got a sketchy vibe inside the house. My boss was completely understanding, especially when the alleged customer didn't call back asking why I left that. Said everything I didn't really understand the logic in trying to commit a robbery in your own house. And nor did my boss or coworkers. So later that night after work, I looked up that address, and that house was foreclosed on months ago, and it had been vacant when I told this to everyone. They had the same mouth-dropping reaction I did. I was truly mere steps away from probably getting robbed that, or someone was trying to play a horrible prank on an unsuspecting pizza delivery guy. When I was in college, I took a job delivering pizzas. Late at night, I usually worked until about 2 a.m., sometimes even later on weekends. Honestly, the job wasn't very nice. The pizza shop was pretty gross, dirty floors, and everything seemed like it was falling apart. But the tips were usually really good, and that made it worth it. At the time, I was 19 years old and female, and this was happening during summertime in Colorado summers. There get pretty hot during the day and even at night now. Remember this detail for later. This was only my second weekend working at this pizza place, so I was still getting familiar with the job. I was already kind of anxious and nervous by nature, especially about meeting strangers at night. So my preferred routine was simple: deliver the pizza as fast as possible, grab my tip, and head straight out to my next delivery. I almost never went inside a customer's house, and if I ever did, I'd make sure to just quickly step in and always keep the door wide open behind me. It felt safer that way. Then, one night close to midnight, I got an order to deliver pizza to a house located on the east side of town, but it was supposed to be my last delivery fortnight. When I arrived, the house looked ordinary, just a regular house with a small porch and a few lights on. Inside, the street itself was very dark, because there weren't many street lights around. But I wasn't really nervous or uncomfortable at that moment. I just wanted to finish my shift and go home. I parked my car along the street, grabbed the pizza box, and walked up the short pathway to the front porch. After taking a quick glance around, I knocked on the door and waited for someone to answer. Then a shirtless older man with a big belly opened the door. He looked like he'd been drinking beer. Immediately, I got a weird feeling from him. He told me to come inside, but I didn't want to. I said no politely and tried handing him his pizza from the doorway, but then he said, "Come inside, it's freezing out there, and we don't want cold air getting in." This was really strange to me because it was summer and definitely not cold at all, but I got nervous and, without thinking clearly, took one small step into his house. But I still didn't fully enter. Then the man said again, "Come all the way inside, it's cold out there." I really should have left immediately, but I was feeling nervous and wasn't thinking clearly. Without realizing what I was doing, I stepped further into his house, and he shut both the screen door and the main door behind me. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself I was probably just worrying too much. Then the man loudly yelled to his wife that the pizza washer I could see his wife in the kitchen cooking something. It felt strange to me. Why would someone order pizza if they were already making dinner? I didn't understand. I looked around their living room, and it was completely full of stuffed animals. They covered every surface. The couches, tables, windowsills, everywhere. Then the man's wife came out of the kitchen toward me. She was holding something in her hand, stretching it out toward me. As she got closer, I saw it was some type of bread or cake here. Eat this banana bread, and don't worry, it's totally safe, trying to stay polite. I quickly said, no, thank you. And telling her I was on a diet, she just stood there, staring at me with her hand still stretched out, waiting for me to take the banana bread. I didn't take it, and suddenly she became very upset. She started yelling at me loudly, insisting that I eat the bread. I said, no again, but this time I wasn't trying to be polite anymore. I told both of them very clearly that I had to leave right away and get back to work. I was still holding the pizza box, and all I could think about was getting out of there as quickly as possible, even if it meant running out the door. Finally, she stopped trying to force me to eat the bread. She gave up, turned around, and walked back into the kitchen. Then the man said to me, "Let me find some change for your tip." He started moving all around the living room, digging through the cushions on the couch, lifting pillows, and even checking under the stuffed animals, trying to find coins or small bills to give me. I quickly told him, "Don't worry about it. Really, I don't need a tip, you can just take the pizza." But he ignored me and kept insisting that he had to find some money to tip me for the next several minutes. He continued searching all around the room, opening drawers and looking under furniture as time passed. I began to wonder if the whole thing was a trick. It seemed as if they were intentionally trying to keep me there, making excuses to stop me from leaving. All I wanted was to get out of there immediately. So without waiting for him, I finally said in a firm voice, "I'm leaving now," and immediately reached for the door handle. Seeing I was serious about leaving, the man grabbed his pizza box out of my hands and handed me a few quarters he'd managed to find. He still seemed annoyed, as if I had rushed him. Honestly, I didn't care about the tip anymore. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. The second I was outside, I practically ran back to my car, jumped in, locked all the doors, and drove away. I was shaking the whole drive back to the pizza shop. When I got back, I went straight to my supervisor and explained exactly what had just happened. But to my surprise, he didn't seem worried or interested at all. He barely even listened. This made me even more upset, because I felt like he wasn't taking my safety seriously at all to this day. I still don't know if that couple was actually dangerous, creepy, or just really weird and socially awkward. But after that night, I never agreed to deliver pizzas to that house again. I made sure someone else always took that delivery last night. On a lazy Friday night when I had the house to myself, I was chilling in the living room with the lights off, watching movie after movie. It was past like 10, and I had a craving for pizza, so I ordered a pie from the local late-night pizza place. It was a rainy night, part of the reason why I chose to just stay in and watch movies. Ironically, I was watching some scary movie at the moment, and at some point during that I heard loud steps coming up the front stoop outside. I waited for a knock or the doorbell, but when I didn't hear either, I muted the TV out of curiosity. I then went to the front door and quietly lifted the slider above the peephole to look out at who could be on the porch. I was expecting to see the pizza guy, but at first all I thought I saw was black. It took me a few moments to realize that I was looking back at someone's eye pressed up on the other side of the peephole. I basically leaped back from being startled. I called through the door, asking if it was the pizza guy. A deep man's voice called back, "Yes, it is." But something wasn't right. I looked through the peephole again, and now it seemed like the man on the other side was covering it with his hand or something. I didn't know what to do, other than yell, "Why are you covering the peephole?" He didn't respond to that instead. He just knocked on the door. I yelled at him to please leave, and I walked away from the door back to the living room. A few moments later, the doorbell rang. I heard the same deep voice yell, "Pizza, open up." I once again got up and went to check through the peephole, but he was still covering it. I shouted at him again to please leave, or I'd be calling the police now. I turned off the TV to allow for total darkness in the house. All I could hear for a while was the sound of the pouring rain outside when I went back to the front door to look through the peephole. Once again, now I was able to see through it. The man was no longer on the stoop. I called the pizza place and asked the guy who picked up the phone if he could check if the delivery driver had arrived to my house. Yet I of course explained what was going on and why I was asking for that. He said he'd give the driver a